All right. We are live. Welcome back, everyone. All right. Welcome back to Bitcoin.com's The Weekly, where we recap the biggest stories in the Bitcoin and cryptoverse. I'm Graham Stone, joined by David Sencil, and this week we're kicking it off with an update on the so-called controversy around the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve.
All right, here we go. So, as everybody knows, the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, talking about the US now, um, was passed earlier this year, but some people were upset that there was no plans to outright buy Bitcoin. Um, and last week, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had some comments that caused maybe the markets to shake a little bit and ruffle some feathers. On Fox Business News, he said that the reserve would only be filled with confiscated Bitcoin and that the government wasn't going to be buying any. This seemed to close the door on what was said previously. And immediately following this, I think Bitcoin pulled back after this, and but hours later, Besant responded to the criticism on X when he clarified that the plan does leave room for budget neutral acquisitions. This is ways of acquiring Bitcoin without necessarily spending any taxpayer money. Quote, Bitcoin that has been finally forfeited to the federal government will be the foundation for the strategic Bitcoin reserve that President Trump established in his March executive order. In addition, Treasury is committed to exploring budget neutral pathways to acquire more Bitcoin to expand the reserve and to execute on the president's promise to make the United States the Bitcoin superpower of the world. So basically, he ended up reiterating exactly what was said from the March executive order, Graham. No
Yeah,
new
I think,
information.
yeah, it's basically a big nothing burger. I think, did people actually believe that the U.S. was going to sell their gold reserves or print money to buy Bitcoin?
Yes, I mean that's what Bitcoiners were saying following the March executive order, right? Many Bitcoiners were disappointed in this executive order, which to me is hilarious if you frame it from 2 years prior during the Biden administration. Like talk about spoiled, right? In any case, they wanted the government to buy their bags straight up, and I think the cope from a lot of Bitcoiners was yes, but they can do some budget neutral buying of Bitcoin where basically no taxpayer money is spent, and so you have people like Samson Mao
Yeah,
who
Samson
still
Mao
believe,
of Jan 3.
yeah, who still believe that gold reserves or printed money will be used to buy Bitcoin. You don't think this is likely, I take it.
Extremely unlikely. If there's any budget neutral buying of Bitcoin, I would say it would just be the trading of other confiscated digital assets for Bitcoin, perhaps. Like let's say they confiscate a bunch of fart coin in a some kind of money laundering scheme or whatever, and okay, that could be conceivably you could see them like converting that to Bitcoin and adding it to the reserve, but we're talking like yeah, it's pittance for
Yeah,
sure.
it's de- definitely
But
Fartcoin is not worth a
not
lot.
only is it extremely unlikely, in my opinion, that they'll ever actually buy significant amounts of Bitcoin, but it's also just undesirable. Like, first of all, it just sort of goes against the principles of what Bitcoin should be, in my opinion. Like, do we really want the government getting that involved in this thing? Do we need that? But also, I think there's just a high chance that such a program could backfire, like basically drawing the ire of non-Bitcoin holders, right? Like, what are you guys doing? You guys are just pumping the assets of your like base supporters, which leads me to what I think the real purpose of this sort of softening of Scott Bessent's tone is that basically, yeah, it's just political pandering. And so actually someone on X noted a comment that agree with. This person said someone in the administration or a major donor clearly whispered in his ear after that interview to soften the market blow.
I mean, the cynical take would be that someone was Trump because the Trump name is associated with like World Liberty Financial, and I think basically a Bitcoin treasury company that I believe just bought a bunch of Bitcoin ahead of its if its public listing. So I mean, you obviously don't want the Trumps don't want the market to tank either. Uh, you could imagine. So yeah, I agree that
All
it's
right.
someone in the administration, but I imagine it could be the man himself. And
All
just
right.
as
Yeah, go ahead.
an American and a taxpayer, I agree with you. I wouldn't want taxpayer dollars like T-whopping Bitcoin because it's so easy to front run. It would just be a terrible strategic way to buy Bitcoin, I think.
Yeah, and I do worry about the government having too much stake in Bitcoin. Like it leads to dark scenarios, in my opinion. All right, let's move on to real news, I think, which is this story: Fed kills crypto crackdown program with quiet bomb drop on banking oversight. So this is related to the Chokepoint 2.0, the debanking controversy. So originally, the Fed had launched a under a supervisory letter in August 2023, a program that was designed to specifically monitor crypto practices, novel banking practices, they called it, and that includes stablecoin issuance, tokenized assets, and API based partnerships with non banks. So that program that is now officially ended, which people are celebrating. You had Senator Cynthia Lummis stating on X, big win for putting an end to Operation Chokepoint 2.0. The Fed announced it's killing the targeted supervision of digital assets banking activities. There's still more to do, but this is real progress toward a level playing field for crypto. And then you also have the House Financial Services Committee supporting the decision, and their quote was, quote, the Fed's action will further the Trump admin's goal of integrating digital assets into the prudential regulatory framework and fostering a vibrant digital asset ecosystem for all participants. Yeah, so it's just this seems like a fairly positive move to end the prejudice against crypto and digital assets.
Yep, at least for the time being. You know, I'm still skeptical that if if this government or future administrations want uh, to kind of stifle an industry, that they'll still be able to. Right? They'll find
Yeah,
another
they'll
way.
find a
But I
way,
mean,
but at least for
yeah,
now, they do appear to be fighting in the corner of crypto.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, so on a related note, uh, talking about banks who were complicit in stifling crypto, the Bank Policy Institute is calling for plugging the Genius Act stablecoin yield loopholes. I think we covered on this podcast or maybe on Token Narratives the fact that PayPal has already launched or is launch in the middle of launching a workaround for providing yield on their stablecoin, and the U.S. banks, which had lobbied Congress to include in the Genius Act um, a ban on yield products on stablecoins, is upset that these loopholes are being exploited already. And so they say, quote, Congress must protect the flow of credit to American businesses and families, Graham. It's about the families, to American businesses and families, and the stability of the most important financial market by closing the stablecoin payment of interest loopholes, the Bank Policy Institute said. Were you
Yeah,
gonna say
it's
something?
kind of rich coming from the banks. It just seems like they're asking to be protected, to have their business protected, so they can continue effectively offering like a sub optimal product, like basically ripping off depositors by giving them no interest. So they want,
Yeah,
and
they don't.
they're claiming that if they don't they're if this loophole isn't closed, it's going to result in like economic chaos. People, they're not going to be, the economy is going to suffer because people aren't going to be getting the loans that they need. That's so they're appealing to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, so there is some truth to this, and I'm gonna pat myself on the back. I brought this up a while ago, which is there is some worry that if lots of deposits migrate to stablecoin products, then the chief function of banks, which is to provide loans to new businesses, basically new businesses, right? Which are kind of the engine of GDP growth, not big businesses, but new small to medium sized businesses. They'll lose a lot of that ability. So that is a concern. Unfortunately, I don't think that this Bank Policy Institute, which represents the biggest banks in America, which are the biggest banks in the world, right? These are your Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo. These people, these banks, they don't provide loans to small and medium sized businesses. Overwhelmingly, they don't provide loans to them, right? The local banks, your regional banks, they're the ones who provide overwhelmingly the loans to small and medium sized businesses. And SMBs are the backbone of GDP. So who cares about these big banks
Yeah.
and their concerns? Because it has they're not the ones who are going to be helping the American families, right?
Yeah, exactly. And but they're couching their language in that way in order to you know, oh, look at poor us. But in their defense, I would note that banks are saddled with crippling regulatory compliance obligations. There's something like 20 I mean, they have whole teams of people that have to like deal with things like the Bank Secrecy Act reports. There's like 2 million of these suspicious activity reports published that they're required to recreate per year or something. Basically, anytime anyone sends any money up more than $10,000 at once, it's suspicious, and they have to deal with that, and they have huge overhead for that, and that's part of the reason why they can't offer competitive products on deposits. They can't provide reasonable interest rates to people because they have to deal with this huge regulatory overhead. So, in their defense, that is kind of true. It's hard for them
Yeah, I
to
mean,
compete.
I think you have to separate these giant mega too big to fail banks from the banks that actually are going to be kind of squeezed out by this, right? Stablecoins really are going to just accelerate the death of these regional banks. That's what I think, right? And is cause for concern. So, I mean, I would be completely okay with making some maybe some legislation or something to kind of give small regional banks some relief. But for these mega banks, all that's is going to happen is it's going to eat away into their margins, right? They're
Yeah,
incredibly profitable, so
yeah,
I don't they whatever they're gonna
yeah.
make less money.
And either way, I actually think it would be impossible for lawmakers to actually give the banks the BPI what they're asking for here, because it would effectively mean prohibiting stablecoin issuers from making any kind of business payment, which you just can't do. So like how it works right now is that these stablecoin issuers like Circle, they make payments to exchanges like Coinbase and to intermediaries. These are the ones that end up offering the yield. So, I mean, how could you actually stop that? What kind of law could you pass? Like the law would be that you're not allowed to make any business payment if you're a stablecoin issuer. It just doesn't, it can't happen, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and if you made the laws strong enough to actually kind of lock down huge swaths of these loopholes, I think it would catch the airlines, and it would catch like Starbucks gift cards and stuff like that, right? Like, because
Yeah.
you'd have to be so draconian, and that's never going to happen, right? Like the airlines depend on these air miles. Did you see that report just tangentially about American Airlines, not the company, but America's airlines? The
Uh-huh.
majority of their profits, the vast majority of their profits come from these air mile programs. The credit
Yeah.
card companies pay them billions of dollars for their miles, and that's where most of the profit comes from. So I mean, these are massive programs, very important, and you're never going to have kind of like these sweeping legislation that would really be able to lock down the loopholes, right? Because at the very worst, these stablecoin issues are just going to kind of recreate air mile programs, I imagine. Like
Yeah.
the yield is going to be in some kind of I don't know, some kind of like rewards program.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to some IPO news. So, Bullish, the cryptocurrency exchange, just IPO'd. They raised $1.1 billion in the IPO. The stock opened at $90 on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker BLSH. Oversubscribed, in the IPO was oversubscribed. It was $37 per share, and it's currently trading at around 70. So it reached up, it reached as high as 90, crashed back down to 70. But let's talk about this for a minute. So first of all, like, what is Bullish, right? It's a cryptocurrency exchange. They pitch themselves as a regulated exchange, highly regulated exchange with deep liquidity for institutions. So they pitch themselves as the exchange that institutions can get a better deal at. The CEO, Tom Farley, he's the former president of the New York Stock Exchange, so that reinforces the exchange's Wall Street credibility and institutional positioning. Interestingly, I didn't know this, Bullish acquired CoinDesk in 2023. That's interesting.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, what I wanted to say about this IPO, what does this IPO mean? Well, I think it means, to me, it's like it's kind of a top signal at or just like a sign of how frothy everything has become in the TradFi markets as it relates to crypto. So this IPO, it's valued at actually a much higher revenue multiple than Coinbase. So Bullish makes around 3% of the revenue that Coinbase does. So like, yeah, Coinbase makes like 25x the money that or more that Coinbase does, or that Bullish does. And actually, Bullish is currently unprofitable. So they have a net loss. It was reported around 349 million in Q1 2025. If you look at the valuation of the company at its peak, just like a day after launching, it was worth $13.2 billion. By comparison, Coinbase, the Coins stock, is valued at around $80 billion. Now, Coinbase has a revenue of around $6.5 billion. So for Bullish, that would be a revenue to valuation ratio of around 86 at the peak. And for Coin, it's like 10 to 13. So uh, extremely frothy, in my opinion.
Yeah. Way overvalued, and it when I saw these numbers, the first thing I thought of was the Pump.Fun ICO. Honestly, that's just what I was like. Oh, looks
Yeah.
exactly like the Pump.Fun ICO, right? Like, um, people got in at a lower rate. right? And
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
incentivized to sell. They're incentivized to sell as soon as it launches, because why not just instantly double, triple your money? And then I I can imagine this will just trade downward from here, right? Like, because
Yeah,
everyone who got in at the roadshow thing or whatever it's called, they're still going to be in crazy profit, I'd imagine.
yeah,
And so I I I agree 100% on this.
yeah. I don't think it's a
Um,
buy. I mean, some other factors at play here, right? I guess there's pent up IPO demand that we haven't seen many IPOs over the last like 4 years. That's one factor. Obviously, the whole crypto meta is kind of like hot in the TradFi realm, so people are like, okay, this is a crypto company, buy. And then maybe the third piece for why this popped so much is, yeah, like there are no AI companies IPOing. That's what people really want exposure to, but this is kind of like a second best, I guess. Somehow AI and crypto are connected in the minds of TradFi bros, maybe.
yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is the biggest, right? Like that crypto is hot right now because
Yeah,
of the digital asset treasury meta, right? And you've
yeah,
seen just these insane multiples on that, like meme coin multiples, you know,
yep,
and that's like catnip for people in TradFi. Like, oh my god, you can get like a 10x in a short
yep.
amount of time, and so yeah, as you said, IPOs haven't there hasn't been like an IPO season in TradFi since last cycle, and so that probably has kind of a feel similar to ICOs in crypto is would be my analogy, and yeah, it just seems crazy. But let me ask you a question, Graham. How much do you think this is going to resemble um, so many of the charts in crypto, where you have this initial pump and then just a sell off forever? you know,
Yeah,
um,
I think it's going to be exactly that, and it might bounce back someday if bullish actually does a like a good job, but I actually think that would be years from now, if ever.
yeah, I agree.
Kind of like
They're at
the
conferences.
dot-com bubble, like where some of these companies did come back.
Yeah, exactly. And you know they have coin desks, so they have consensus, and it's a decent way to kind of maybe get exposure. I don't
Yeah,
know, but here's the problem with all this though, which I think we've talked about before though. You go to a conference, if you're a conference goer, you're pretty much as close. You're going to be crypto native or as close enough to it. You're gonna be on like 10 exchanges already, right? Like you have tons of exchanges. That's not where you're going to get new users, I'd imagine, at a conference. You want to advertise to my mom or
yeah.
something like
Well,
that. So
they position themselves as the institutional exchange, so maybe by hosting these conferences, they get access to whales, like new
yeah, but are
whales, new
they? I mean,
entrants. Yeah.
not in the U.S. I mean, why would you do that versus Coinbase or Gemini, for example? Gemini gets a lot of institutional flow, I think, too.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
speaking of Gemini and the IPO window, the Gemini and Kraken and others are sort of scrambling to get in
that's
before
right.
while the
Yeah,
getting's good.
yeah. So August 15th of last week, Gemini filed a registration statement with the SEC for an IPO on Nasdaq under the ticker. Get this, GEMI. That's a creative. So again, this is long overdue. Um, and I remember last cycle there were rumors that they late in the cycle they were thinking about IPOing then, but they decided to hold off because they saw that I think that they saw the markets were getting a little frothy, and so they held on to now. So the Winklevi, um, they're the ones who founded Gemini. It's one of the oldest, most respected exchanges in crypto, certainly in America. And like I said, they have kind of catered, I think, to kind of hardcore crypto users, and I think they have a fair amount of institutional flow. So, you know what? I'd imagine that this goes higher than bullish, right? They raised 1.1 billion. You'd have to think that Gemini is easily able to outdo that. At least I would. Um,
Yeah, I
so
wouldn't be
if you're able
surprised.
to get it, yeah.
Just a note here, which is that Gemini is also somehow a crypto exchange that is not profitable. I'm
Oh,
not sure
really?
how that works. Yeah, so according
Oh
to
my
its
goodness.
latest S1 filing, which was covering the months ending June 30th, Gemini disclosed a net loss of 282.5 million on
Good lord.
68.6 million in revenue. So
66.8 million, not billion.
look, this is from the machine, so I can't guarantee it, but I did hear this elsewhere.
Wow. You know, this reminds
280
me.
net loss of 282 million.
I I covered in my newsletter maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago the kind of the bullish Q2 filings from Strategy, Coinbase, and one other I can't remember off the top of my head. On the surface, they were all very positive, right? Like major beats. But then under the hood, you saw almost all the profit was from just just from their Bitcoin holdings, and it was like a one-time profit because of the rule changes. And Coinbase, for example, which had billions in profits, um, their trading volume from Q2 2024 to Q2 2025, so 1 year, was only up 5%, right? Like tiny improvement on trading volume. And that in a bull market seems bad. And so if they're the market leader in the US, and I think they certainly are, then it does make sense that these other exchanges like Gemini would be suffering even more. And Coinbase was making most of its cash on either holding Bitcoin or and holding other people's Bitcoin. And they're like the biggest holder of spot spot Bitcoin ETFs, right? So I don't think Gemini has any products like that, do they? Of just like holding institutional.
Custody, yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Not like
Either way,
Coinbase. So
though,
man,
I think you're right that when they do finally IPO, they'll do well. They'll
yeah.
make bank just because of the structure of the markets right now, as we discussed.
Yeah, so they're gonna do the classic crypto project run, which is have a bunch of insider coins, um, let the market moon initially, and then just sell out your coins for the next 5 years into all the demand.
Yeah. All right. All right, let's move on to the age old question of whether alt season is coming. And Coinbase says yes, it is. They see a full scale alt season brewing with September rotation in sight. So this is a report from Coinbase Institutional, which they released a few days ago, August 14th. It's titled "Alt Season Cometh." It's almost like an Arthur Hayes blog post title.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I don't like it. I don't like it.
yeah.
It's a
So
weird look.
it's a
Coinbase
weird look.
institutional.
Yeah, exactly. I'm surprised there's no like misspelling of the word hold in there.
And
So
like maybe
anyway,
the cover images of like a Pepe or something. It's like absolutely try hard cringe.
so the firm's global head of research, David Duong, wrote, "quote Our 3Q 2025 3Q25. What does that mean? The third quarter
Quarter,
of 2025
third quarter, yeah.
outlook. Our Q3 2025 outlook remains constructive, though our view on altcoin season has evolved." And he added, "We think current market conditions now suggest a potential shift toward a full-scale altcoin season as we approach September." So The altcoin season index, for those who are following, it does remain below the key 75-point threshold. So, but altcoin market cap has risen over 50% since early July, reaching around $1.4 trillion as of the latest numbers that I have, which are just a few days ago or a week ago. Bitcoin's dominance, of course, has declined from its latest peak of 65 to now below 60%, which is a sign that altcoin season is coming. And then Coinbase also points to a record $2.7 trillion parked in US money market funds. And they say they see that as sort of a latent pool of capital that could re enter the crypto ecosystem if monetary policy becomes more accommodative. And then one last quote from the report: "We think Fed easing could unlock greater retail participation in the medium term." So let's discuss this for a minute. But I just to preface the discussion, which would with something which, like, look, always question the messenger with these kinds of predictions. Obviously, Coinbase wants an alt season because they'll make a ton of money on trading fees if it happens. So it's in their best interest to be publishing these kinds of reports. But
Yeah.
there's other questions around whether alt season will come. One take that it's alt season won't come, like the alt seasons we've had in the past, is that the accumulators of ETH are not degen traders. It's like money that's going into what is the I can never remember Tom
DATs.
Lee's
The,
company. Yeah, these DATs. And those are kind of, they're not those money, that money, when it's in profit, it's not rotating into alts. It's sort of stuck there. It's kind of like dead money, really. And in previous cycles, the wealth effect of people who made a ton on ETH, they then went and like put that into other riskier bets down the curve. So the argument is that that may not happen this time because of the different structure of the market participants.
yeah. I think that's generally correct, but it's it's still a better situation than with Bitcoin. Would be my take on it, right? Like the people buying Bitcoin are the really stuffy people, and their idea of going out on the risk curve is buying ETH. And then the people who hold a lot of Bitcoin, they tend to not dabble too much into the crypto ecosystem as much as people who hold a lot of ETH
Yeah,
would dabble
exactly.
into the right. And so you get this thing where um, I do think that an increased or an elevated ETH price will have a lot more effect on the rest of the crypto structure than Bitcoin. But yeah. A lot of it won't be like last time, right? It won't be like
Yeah.
previous cycles, probably.
And a lot of big ETH bag holders capitulated. I'm not calling myself a whale by any stretch of the imaginations, but I'm one of the capitulators. And the point of that is just to say that, like a lot of crypto natives or whatever uh, aren't necessarily benefiting from the recent like 3x or 2x of
Yeah,
ETH.
yeah.
It's more
Oh,
the DATs, the digital asset treasury companies who bought.
yeah. I do think that we will eventually have an alt, like a proper alt season. I think for me the necessary ingredients for that to happen though is you really have to have ETH kind of go crazy, and we haven't even breached all time highs yet, right? We got
Yeah.
close, we flirted with it, but you really want to see ETH enter price discovery like Bitcoin did, right? Bitcoin did that for a while, and until that happens with ETH, we're nowhere. And even if even if ETH hits all time high, you'd have to see it kind of then enter price discovery, 5K, 6K, something like that, before I think you see a proper rotation. And that would be my guess. And all the while that this is happening, I Bitcoin is still kind of just kind of consolidating, you know? And I think at any point, for whatever reason, we're going to have to see. I mean, I think it has to happen in the next couple months. I mean, because Bitcoin's been consolidating here for a bit. When Bitcoin starts to really rip, that's going to suck all the liquidity out of the rest of crypto back into Bitcoin for a while, right? And so, I don't know. I wouldn't. I honestly wouldn't expect a like a proper altcoin season until Bitcoin rips quite a bit higher, right? Like 150, 200, something like that.
Yeah.
And then maybe after that you get a proper alt season. But
Yeah.
that's just kind of my intuition. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, let's cover our last story of the week
Yeah.
here.
So
Also
talking about
Coinbase related.
Coinbase, yeah, this is another good story. You can tell that I think just before I get into this, I've noticed that Coinbase is really, I think they must be, they're not must be, they're doing this on purpose, which is trying to get in the headlines with kind of color commentary or analysis about alt seasons cometh. Brian Armstrong has lots of posts like this recently, so they're obviously on their marketing game, and this is, I think, a good example of that. So, Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong compared today's crypto adoption to that moment where Blockbuster and Netflix were in competition. I don't know, for a lot of you, you're probably not old enough to remember, but there was this like magical time where both of those companies were fighting over market share at the same time. And obviously, Netflix won out massively, and Blockbuster is no longer a thing. And so, Brian Armstrong thinks that we're kind of in that kind of magic moment where crypto adoption is disrupting traditional finance. Right? They're both kind of coexisting, but because crypto is better technology and more efficient and all these kinds of things, you'll look back maybe in 10, 15, 20 years and it'll just be completely different, which is really what happened with Blockbuster and Netflix, right? For those of us old enough to remember, it's kind of hard to even remember how omnipresent, at least in the United States, Blockbuster was. It was everywhere, you know. And I still remember my parents getting Netflix for the first time, where you got mailed DVDs, and it was kind of like, this is kind of stupid. Um, and then, I mean, look at it today; it's ridiculous. And so, it's an interesting analogy, and it's something interesting to mull over. Uh, I'll get your thoughts in a moment, Graham. But for me, the important thing here is that what is that aphorism? It's something like people overestimate too much in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. And this Blockbuster versus Netflix framing kind of really encapsulates that. Where at the moment when Blockbuster and Netflix were in the market at the same time, um, it, it would have been impossible for me to predict what today looks like and what Netflix looks like today, right? Like back when they were mailing DVDs, and then now they're
Yep.
like this major studio that's like paying for movies and stuff like that. And Blockbuster is not a company, and so you could, I mean, if you think about it like that, what could crypto look like 20 years from now? Which doesn't, it's really not that long of a time, and it could be the case where crypto is the financial industry, and there isn't anything that is non-crypto. So anyway, that's kind of how I looked at this story.
Yeah, hearing you summarize this, I start like getting, I don't know, starry-eyed, dream like what could become, and it's exciting. So it's this is good marketing from Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong. He'll never be held account to this, so because it's a prediction to 20 years in the future. So, but it's kind of fun to think about.
Yeah, and I mean it's. we're all impatient to make lots of money, but boy, could you have made a ton of money if you had somehow gotten a hold of Netflix, a little bit of Netflix equity back in those days, huh? And just held it for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, good God. Holy moly.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, coin the stock is potentially a good buy, but it does beg the question, right? Like that we've talked about quite a bit on this and token narratives is like who's who's going to be the winner here? Is it going to be businesses like Coinbase, maybe businesses like Robinhood, or is it the incumbents like J.P. Morgan who are just going to like finally make their own chains and just eat everyone else's lunch because they already have the distribution?
Yeah. I mean, that's the equity play. But I mean, where this differs from the analogy is you also have this new asset that we're all used to, but is still kind of a new thing where it has equity like upside. I'm talking about Bitcoin and other tokens. But it is also a store of value, a medium of exchange, and so I mean the safest bet is to just buy Bitcoin, maybe buy a couple of the major alts like Ethereum or Solana, and you will get massive upside on those because the ecosystem kind of revolves around exchanging, transacting those digital assets. And for me, I'm an idiot. I can't really do that like future guessing of like, oh, is it going to be Coinbase? Is Coinbase going to be the company in 20 years? I don't know. It's way harder for me to, and I have no intelligent thing to say about that.
Yeah, and of course there's survivorship bias, right? Anyone who like put some money on Facebook at the right time is a genius, and anyone who put money in, I don't know, GeoCities, if that was even a company or something you could
Yeah.
like buy in the public markets, they're still poor, so you don't hear
Yeah.
from them as much.
Yeah, I mean, there is. I would say though, like the advice that you always hear from people at those times is like you should invest in things that you spend a lot of time on. And man, if I had bought a little Apple stock, because I was the first person I knew who bought Apple products. I had
Yeah,
the I had an early iPod before anyone had them. I had an early MacBook before anyone I knew had them, and I loved them and I proselytized them. I should have bought like I'm spending thousands of dollars on this crap. I should have bought like $3, 4, $500 of Apple stock, and Google too.
yeah,
I remember using like Ask Jeeves and all that stuff before I found Google really really early. Anyway, for crypto products, the things like the exchanges to me seem rather how do you say you can kind of just move between them. I think pretty easily.
yeah.
So
Not necessarily a big moat for the
yeah,
exchanges.
yeah, exactly. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's just thoughts.
All right, good thoughts, and thanks for the recap, David. This week, next week, we're going to be doing this show live from WebEx Tokyo, so
Oh
around the
my
same
God,
time next week.
that's
Be
right.
sure to tune in. Yeah, it's going to be lots of interesting content coming out of that. We've got an interview with everyone's favorite bullshit poster, Arthur Hayes. Look forward to that
That's
one.
right.
And
That'll be
other
fun.
great content. All right, David. Let's call it a day. Thanks again. Thanks for everyone for listening. Adios.
See you.